I am back today with a different type of video than I normally film for my channel. So today I'm going to be doing my very first author spotlight video. And I know I've been talking about doing these for a few months now, at least. And every time I talk about this author's books, I'm like, you guys, I'm going to do an author video. Well, here it is. So I've done the work to get all of my remarks prepared, which is why I'm coming to you, which is really what had me like hesitate, because I was like, okay, there's a lot to say. And I really wanted to get my thoughts organized and kind of get her reading, like her book catalog kind of organized in a way that I could have it make sense. Because I think it's just a rich enough world that unless I was really prepared, it would be kind of a jumbled mess describing it. So I'm not committed to that is your experience today while we're together. So let me first get started with a little bit of background for kind of how I found this author, and then we'll get into her catalog. So I was pregnant actually in 2020. I got pregnant in the beginning of 2020. So in the summer of 2020, I was, deep into my pregnancy and started to wake up, like in my second trimester, I started to wake up in the middle of the night. Sometimes it was like 3 or 4 in the morning, and would have various levels of success with falling back asleep. So imagine I'm working 10, 11-hour days, I'm fully remote, and I'm pregnant, and I'm freaking exhausted. So I would go to sleep really early with the hopes that I could get enough sleep. I had, a range of success with that. But anyway, the nights that I could not go back to sleep, I started to read. Started to read a lot of different kinds of things. But I had also, it's like I would read, or I would watch YouTube clips or movies or kind of something in the hopes of falling to sleep. Typically, it wouldn't really work. If I was watching a movie on my phone, it would still be awake, but it was something to pass the time. So I watched the movie 365 Days on Netflix. So if you've seen the movie, you know what I mean? It was like, this is an interesting escape. So that for me was kind of an entree into the mafia romance kind of world. So I started to seek out books. And pretty quickly, I found Bella DiCorte. And the first book that I read in all of her catalog was Machiavellian, which is the first book of the Gangsters of New York series. Now, these are 3 standalone novels inside of that series. So let's get into Machiavellian. So this story is about Machiavello, and Mari. I can't remember her last name. It doesn't matter. First name is Mari. And Mari is an orphan. She'd been raised in foster care, and she lives in New York and is really having a hard time. She's not on the street, but she's like 21. She has a couple of jobs and is just kind of barely scraping by. And that's kind of how we meet her. And Machiavello owns a restaurant. I can't remember the name of the restaurant. It's not that important to the story. It's just like a restaurant that actually is kind of a neutral zone for different kind of mafia families in New York. And so that's him. He's kind of famous in the kind of world because nobody knows what he looks like. He keeps really low profile. So Mari is, like I said, she's struggling, and she has this roommate who is just kind of like, she's the type of person she's described as like getting bent out of shape if you eat her food in the fridge. Like kind of mean and nasty, not a very nice, generous person, but just really kind of like she's out for herself. So she the roommate doesn't come home, and Mari needs to go into this roommate's bedroom for some reason. And she finds a ticket to a club, and for some reason, it's like a golden ticket, and she decides to go in her place, and she pretends to be her roommate. I don't remember her roommate's name. Don't worry about it. And so she goes, and she's let into the club, and she's brought back into this room, and she's by herself. And then Matt comes in. She doesn't know it's him, and they have an interaction. And then the interaction ends, and then she leaves, and she's like, "Oh, that was weird." And then I think it's a day or so later, she's invited to come to an office of a lawyer, Rocco Fausti. So we'll talk about him later. This may not be exactly how it happens, but this is in the vein. So I've read so many of her books that, forgive me, some of the details are a little not 100%. So anyway, so she basically gets invited to enter into a marriage of convenience with Mac. And so there's a scene of them kind of working out all of the details of the marriage contract. And Rocco is there. And so they enter into the contract, and then their story unfolds from there. And there's some, twists and turns and reveals that are really, really interesting. And the characters themselves are really, to me, very compelling. And I just really love this story enough to keep going. So I think I don't think I was giving star ratings at this point, but definitely 4-star read. Machiavellian, super interesting. To me, a really interesting twist on marriage of convenience. But it really opened up for me a really interesting world that there's threads of it that I'll kind of get into as I talk about the other books. So then the next book in that series is Marauder, and this follows Cash Kelly. Cashel is his name, but he goes by Cash. And Keely, what is her name? Keely Ryan, excuse me. Keely Ryan. I tried so hard to remember characters' names, and we'll have varying levels of success. Okay. So Keely and Cash are thrown together when Keely's brother Harrison gets a job with Cash. Now, Cash is part of the Irish organized crime families in New York. And I'm not going to call it mafia because that's an Italian word, and it's organized crime. They don't give it a Gaelic name. So anyway, whatever. So Harrison is working for Cash, and Keely is dating a detective. Stone, I think, is the detective's name. And for whatever reason, we find out that Cash has basically hired Harrison as his lawyer, who he's graduated law school and everything. And he's hired Harrison to basically get to Keely. So since Keely's dated Stone, there was some kind of beef between this detective Stone and Cash, that Cash decides he's going to take Keely away from Detective Stone. So he's like, "You're going to marry me, Keely, or I'm going to kill your brother or something. I'm going to go after your family." So she's from this Irish Scottish family from Staten Island. And she's like, "I don't have a choice." So she enters into this marriage under duress. So then their story unfolds from there, and there's some misunderstandings. There's, we get to meet her family. She has 4 brothers, excuse me. She has 4 brothers, and including Harrison. And it's just, for me, I absolutely love this story. I've reread that book, I think 3 times. I don't do that. I don't reread books. I really don't. So I reread Marauder, I think 3 times. I've read chapters by themselves of Marauder 3 times. And it's just oh, I love Daddy Cash. And the 2 of them together is super interesting. So one of the things that I like about this story too is that Keely is her personification is that she's 5'10", and I'm a tall woman, and I was like, "Oh, thank you." Yeah. Made her tall. And so he was over 6 feet tall. So it was a good balance, right? But I don't know. I really enjoyed that story a lot. So that's Marauder. Okay. So then the 3rd book in the Gangsters of New York series is Mercenary. So this book follows Corrado and Alcina. And we actually meet them in Sicily, where the beginning of the story is set. So they have this really interesting kind of love affair in Sicily, and that results in them getting married. And you kind of get insight into a kind of Sicilian wedding rituals and kind of what all that is, that you're reading it and you're like, "Oh, that's so interesting." Meanwhile, I have no idea if it's actually true, but I'm just "Oh, wow." So they go back to New York, and then the story unfolds from there. And there's some connection to Machiavellian that I'm not going to go into. You got to read the story, but initially you read the book and you're kind of like, okay, how's this relate? And then you find out. So that was Mercenary by Mercenary. It's part of the Gangsters of New York series. So that one for me didn't hit as well as the other 2 books in the series, but I liked it well enough. And then at this point, I'm like, okay, what else do I read? Because I love this author's writing, and I gotta keep going. So then the next series that I came across was the Fausti Family series. So if you've read if you've watched many more of my videos, my previous videos where I rate specific books, you've heard me talk about the Fausti Family series. Okay, because I've definitely read some of her books this year. She released, I think, 3 books this year that I absolutely loved. Feature them in my reading wrap-ups and my best of 2023. But let's talk about the Fausti Family. Okay, so this is an 8-book series. So this is a whole saga. This ranges, I think it's like 20 plus years from the time the main characters are in their teens to the time they have a family and they've settled down and they've just had this whole life together. That's like a saga. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first book is Man of Honor. That's just the series beginning. So we meet Brando and Scarlett outside of the ballet studio where Scarlett is practicing. She is 15 years old and she's being trained by her grandmother, who is a world-renowned ballerina. And again, she's 15. So at this time, I think Brando's like 18 or so. And Brando was actually best friends with her brother. Now, up until this time, he'd been around Scarlett's house, Brando had, but she hadn't really kind of noticed him, even though he, like I said, he'd been around and, hanging out with the brother. But they have an interaction outside of the ballet studio. It starts to snow. Now, the reason this is like a big deal is because they grew up in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and so they hadn't really seen snow very often. So they were experiencing it as a really magical phenomenon. So this would kind of kick off their relationship. So he's really like struck by her. She's struck by him. And that's the kind of opening in the book. Now, in this book, they do experience some tragedy that really really impacts both of them, her family and him. He is an only child to his mother, Maggie. And, they kind of have to work through it together. There's just kind of a lot of ups and downs. Now, one thing I want you to know about this series is these are not standalone books. So if you are interested in the Fausti Family series, you got to start with Man of Honor. You can't pick up in the middle of it and expect to know what's going on. I don't think it'd be enjoyable. So start with Man of Honor. It's a little bit of a slow burn because she's underage, and it's super appropriate the way that it's handled. But it does a really great job over a few hundred pages of really like fleshing out their characters, the beginnings of their relationship, kind of who they are for each other. And the way that the story gets set, like the setting and the tone, you're like, it's the 90s because of like the clothes and the music and the kind of stuff they're doing. And they're just like kids from this like country town. And it was so enjoyable. So super, super enjoyable. And it really sets up the kind of family dynamics and all of the kinds of trials and tribulations that they're going to have to overcome throughout their lives together. So, like I said, this story goes for 20 years. This features, let me talk about the characters themselves. Okay, so Scarlett is our main female character. Now, she is, like I said, she's 15. She's a ballet dancer. She comes from a family of affluence. Her father is I think he's like an oil billionaire or something. They talk about his private jet a lot. And her mother is a fashion designer. And like I said, her grandmother is a famous ballerina. This is her maternal grandmother. They don't really talk about her father's side of the family too much. But it's that. Now, her father is a serial philanderer. Like, it's a big part of this series and is one of the reasons. So throughout kind of her and her relationship with Brando, she does express some trust issues that have to do with her witnessing her father's infidelity in multiple parts of of her life, like multiple periods of her life. She's like witnesses her father like screwing around on her mother. And it just really like colors her opinion of men, even though she really knows Brando's heart. She loves him very deeply. There's still something like some doubt in the back of her mind that was cast by her father at a very young age. I think she was like an early teenager the first time she saw an infidelity. She has a brother and a sister. This is Scarlett. The sister is older. And the sister is a little bit of a villain in the series. So keep that in mind. Scarlett is described as otherworldly beautiful. She has this beautiful chestnut hair, kind of more of a reddish chestnut. She has what is described as feline eyes, so like a really beautiful shape that is just like really mesmerizing. So, along with her looks, her beauty, and her just her like physicality, she becomes a famous ballerina. So that is also kind of something they've got to deal with in their lives. Now, Brando is born to Maggie when Maggie was 16. Maggie is from Sicily, and Brando was raised speaking Sicilian. And actually, when we meet Brando, I think it's in Man of Honor, his mother doesn't know how to read or write. So it's like that kind of growing up. He basically talks about how he's like, he doesn't know how he made it out alive just with this like super young, really kind of incapable mother. I mean, she does her best, but what are you going to do? People have described Monica Bellucci, the actress Monica Bellucci, as like resembling what kind of fans of the series would picture Brando's mother to look like. So anyway, she has an affair when she's 16 with Luca Fausti. So Luca Fausti is an Italian scion of a very famous Italian mafia family. And for whatever reason, he's in Louisiana, and he has a tryst with, I think it's more than a tryst. I think he has this like affair with a 16-year-old Maggie. She gets pregnant. She has Brando, and for reasons that I won't get into, and this is going to be a really long video, he goes to prison. So when we meet Scarlett and Brando and they're teenagers, Brando's father is in prison in Louisiana. Meanwhile, he's still like kind of running the family in Italy. Now, Brando knows about his father. He knows about the role that he holds in this kind of Fausti family back in Italy, but he really shuns that life. So the first couple of books are like he's really making his way, really separate from that family. Scarlett's making her way as a ballerina. They're really kind of trying to be together while still making their own way in the world. And then at some point, he does kind of join the family. This is a kind of another point of contention in their relationship. And then we start to meet his brothers. He does have 3 brothers. I think it's Dario, Rocco, and Romeo. And so there's 4 Fausti brothers. Now, these are all Luca's sons, but they're with different women because Luca was married to a woman who was barren, couldn't bear him children. And so he had his sons through affairs. Apparently this is acceptable. In the story, this is acceptable. So, okay. So that's that. And so then the rest of the series, they're like, they live in Paris at one point. They go back to Louisiana. They go to Italy. They're in Italy for a lot of the series. They're in New York for a good amount of the series as well. So if you really want a really wide-ranging saga that takes you through kind of many periods of people's lives and really deals with challenges they would face. And honestly, it's super escapist because these are not normal people, but, and has really interesting side characters and her family and his family and the people that they meet along the way. This story is incredible. Now, if you're interested in Bella DiCorte as an author, this is also a must-read series for her because she weaves characters from the Fausti family saga into many of the other books. So I'll kind of mention that. So, I mentioned that a little later. So like I said, Fausti Family series starts with Man of Honor. It's 8 books. I put the book titles up so you can see. And, definitely, if you're interested in investing time in a world, I highly recommend it. Okay, so then I read, what did I read? So let's talk about the Ryan Brothers series. So there are 2 books in the series. I think there's 2 other brothers. So my hope is that there's 4 books total in this series, but 2 of them are released. So the first book in the Ryan Brothers series is Skin Deep, which features Harrison and Gigi. So we met Harrison actually in Machiavellian. Now, because we met Keeley from Marauder in Machiavellian too, because Keeley is Mari's best friend. Didn't say that in my kind of description of Machiavellian and Marauder, probably should have, but anyway, here we go. So Harrison is, like I said, Cash Kelly's lawyer. And when we meet Harrison in Machiavellian, he has deep, deep feelings, like very long-standing crush on Mari that he has to kind of work through. So she marries Machiavello, and he's crushed, and he's kind of trying to deal with his life. He's bought a house in Staten Island next door. It was like the house that she grew up in before her foster family passed away, and she was like spread around into other foster families. So he bought that house for her, and she never had those types of feelings for him. So when we meet Harrison in Skin Deep, he's really reeling from this. Now, he goes to Mari and Mac's wedding in Italy, and there he meets Gigi, who is Mac's cousin. And she is a famous Italian actress, and they have a tryst. So this is their story. And it's like it's a standalone, but I would read both Machiavellian and Marauder to really appreciate the story. You do get cameos from Mari and Mac. You do get cameos from Cash and Keeley. But it really kind of deepens like Harrison, his character, and you just really fall in love with him. And Gigi is this really interesting character. She's this like vivacious, buxom, beautiful Italian like character that's so interesting in comparison to Harrison and kind of the Irish Scottish way that he was raised. But they have form a deep connection and deep love for one another that is really sweet to read. And by the time the book closes out, you got a really nice resolution there. So that's Skin Deep. And then the next book is Bone Deep. Now this is Lachlan and Clara Bow's story. And Lachlan is the second son, the second oldest of Keeley's brothers. Now, this book opens up and it's a bit of a different tone than Skin Deep and even Marauder, which is we meet Lachlan in Marauder because we kind of deepen Keeley's story there, right? So, okay, so we meet Lachlan in Marauder, but this is his story. So this story, I would say, is like a best friend sister relationship, a little bit of second chance. I'm not going to go into it too much. I don't want to spoil it, but we meet Clara Bow. She is a nurse for one of the Fausti characters. Okay, let's just take a pause and we'll talk about some of our threads that ties our series together. Okay, so we meet Dr. Tito Sala in Machiavellian, and he is also featured heavily in the Fausti Family series. So he is the uncle to the Fausti boys through his wife. That's right. He's an uncle by marriage. And he is an uncle. He's a kind of an uncle figure to Mac. So he's like at Mac and Mari's wedding. He's in Marauder because what he does is he's a doctor, and he's in all of these kind of makeshift hospital setups that they have in the organized crime has all over New York. So he's needed in Marauder. And in that story, we meet Clara Bow because she's a nurse for Dr. Tito Sala. And that's at nighttime. And then during the day, she's a clinical nurse in a hospital or something in New York. And she has a son. She's married. She's married to a real dirtbag. So she's trying to lose him. And I don't remember exactly kind of the story, but hold on. Okay, I remember now. So in Bone Deep, Lachlan gets injured. No, in Marauder, he gets injured. So they kind of deepen it, and they take that time frame that happened in Marauder and really focus the story in Bone Deep about. So Lachlan's injured. and he has to go to one of these kind of, underworld hospitals. And Clairbeau is his nurse and was like visiting him all the time. He's out of it. He doesn't know she's doing this. She's visiting him all the time. She's taking care of him. She's really nursing him back to health. She's dedicating a lot of herself to bringing him back to life. Because I think he like codes or something crazy. So he comes out of all of his injuries, and then he's told, oh yeah, Clara was really by your bedside all the time. And he's like, something in him awakens, because the thing that he doesn't fess up to is that he's always had a thing for her. Because like I said, she's his best friend's sister, but the best friend is also kind of a bad dude and kind of warned Lachlan off of Clairbeau. But he's like, obviously, I got to take this as a sign to pursue her. And so he does. And their story unfolds from there. And actually really, really enjoyed this story. I thought it was really wide ranging. They end up in Ireland at some point. This happens in Marauder too. So like, if you want to read books that have locations all over the world, definitely dig into Bella DiCorte. But in Bone Deep, they are in Ireland and they come back, and there's her little son who's freaking adorable. And Lachlan, his perception of himself kind of at the beginning of the book is that he is a ne'er-do-well, like he's kind of a screw up, can't really do anything right. He has a temper problem that kind of gets him into skirmishes and into like harm's way. That's kind of deepened in the story as well in terms of being in harm's way. And so he's really convinced himself up until this point that he's not good enough for Clara, but she was so devoted to him that he's just like, okay, well, this is my chance, right? And then he goes about really seeking to ensure that she feels that he's good enough for her. And she has always had feelings for Lachlan, but just was like, I'm not good enough for him. I'm plain, I'm mousy, even though to Lachlan, she's beautiful, whatever. So to herself, she's not good enough for him. So I don't know. It's just, to me, I thought it was really sweet. There was part of the ending that didn't quite hit for me. So this wasn't one of my higher rated books, but I really enjoyed the series. I'm really looking forward to the next book about the next brother based on my correspondences with the author. I don't know when we're going to get that, but I'll talk about that a little later. Okay, so that's the Ryan Brothers series. Again, related to Marauder, which is in the second book of Gangsters of New York series. Okay, so then let's talk about, what should we talk about next? Okay, here we go. Then we're going to talk about the second, like the next gen for the Fausti children. So Scarlett and Brando end up having a bunch of kids. That's a little bit of a spoiler, and I'm sorry. But read the series. There's already second gen. They have some kids. So this book is called, the first book of the second gen series is called Machiavellian Prince. So this story follows Brando and Scarlett's daughter, Mia, and Mac and Mari's son, Saverio. So Mia and Saverio have a little bit of an age gap. I think it's like 5 or 6 years. But in the Fausti Family series, Saverio is brought on to the Fausti security detail, and his first setup, like position, is to be Mia's bodyguard. And she's like 12 or 13. She's also a training ballerina as well. So, they meet when she's like underage and he's like just like 18, 19. And immediately they have a really strong connection, similar to her parents, Brando and Scarlett. Now, the thing about Brando and Scarlett that I'll say that I haven't mentioned yet is that they have the type of connection that they really view themselves as soulmates. So it's this very, like Scarlett is described as an empath. So they kind of have that level of connection where they can like feel each other. So it's similar from Mia and Saverio. He's not necessarily as like empathic to other things as he is to her, Saverio, right? So anyway, it's really amazing. So she's in danger. You got to read her parents' story for this to make any sense, because there's a plot line that gets completed in the Machiavellian Prince. But she's in danger, so he's brought back to be her bodyguard. They kind of tussle. she's like, no, you're going to be, if you're around me, you're going to get hurt. Something's going to happen to you. So she basically wants him to go away because initially he's a distraction to her ballet, like focusing on ballet. Because whenever he's around, she can't focus on anything but him. She needs to focus. And then, later as he comes back, as his family's like, no, we need you. We will only trust you to watch her. And she's under this like grave danger. She's like, no, I don't want anything bad to happen to you. So you have to go away. So there's this kind of constant tussle that they work through in their story. I really liked it. I think it really set up the second generation really, really well, really in an interesting way. We'll see how well the other siblings' stories rate. I think they're going to be really interesting, but I did really enjoy this one. So it was a nice second gen entry after the kind of the Fausti family saga. Like I really feel like it did it justice. So that's Machiavellian Prince. Okay, so then let's move on to Vice City. Okay. Now, this is like could be considered like outside of the Fausti world. Well, sorry, it's not. Sorry, it's not. It's not. So set in New York. The first book in the series is Ruthless Consequences, and this is Brio and Lucila's story. Okay. So because it's set in New York and Bella DiCorte is a mafia writer, Brio is part of a New York mafia family. Now, Lucila is like someone who he fell in love with when they were younger, but she like shunned him. She was like, no, I can't be with you. And so he's like kind of kept watch over her for many years until she's in danger. So he has to kind of come in her life and start to protect her. Now, she works at a bakery that his father owns. So she's never really that far from him, but they're not together, right? So it's kind of like It's Always Been You kind of trope. So let me take a drink. Hold on. Okay. I lasted 2 weeks. I'm not going to say what this is, but it's not a dry January. Okay. So I digress. So the thing about Lucila's character is that she has had a very troubled upbringing. Her father is really emotionally unavailable. Her mother is out of the picture. And in this story, they come to realize that her mother actually did some pretty bad things to her and her sister. And the whole time her and her sister are growing up, they have this vision of their mother that in these two books, there's 2 books in this series, they kind of get teased apart, and then they start to really have more of an appreciation for their father. So anyway, Lucila, the thing about her is that she has an addiction to chocolate. So we kind of get into that a little bit, but really, really sweet story, really kind of like love heals, like vibe in it. Also, I'll say one of the things that I love about Bella DiCorte is that, so she has all these series that like there's interrelationships, and it's a similar genre, mafia romance, right? Italian mafia romance. But she actually, I think, and really intentionally and masterfully creates a very different tone for each series. So the Gangsters of New York series has a different tone than the Fausti family, has a different tone than Vice City, and so on. Now, there are characters that show up, but it doesn't do anything to kind of alter the tone that I think is super intentional and well thought out. So you read the book and it's not like you're like, oh, it's just like the other series, and they don't really blend together. I don't think. I think they really do kind of stand on their own. And for me, that's so unique. Cora Riley. Some authors don't do it that well. What? Anyway, I digress. So that's Ruthless Consequences. Really great entree into Vice City. I don't know if I gave this one 4 stars, but it's a 4-star read. Okay, then the next book in the series is Dangerous Obsession by Bella DiCorte. Obviously, we're talking about her books. So this story features Naz and Ava. Now, Ava is Lucila's sister. So similar upbringing. She's younger than Lucila, so she has, different perspective about her parents and goes through her own journey. Now, the reason the series is called Vice City is because Ava is a journalist at a publication called Vice City. And what this publication's feature or focuses on is stories, kind of gossip about underworld. So, mafia family in New York, but then kind of all over the US. And so she's got a bit of a healthy obsession with the Faustis because they make news and people are really interested in stories about them. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So Ava is a complicated figure. She's pretty emotionally unavailable. She's been hurt by her mom taking off, her dad being like, he's described as just kind of like occupying an easy chair in their living room and just kind of they're raising themselves after their mom leaves. And they're pretty young when she leaves. I think like Ava's not 10. No, when the mom leaves. So pretty impactful, right? And so anyway, so she's a journalist. She has an apartment kind of in name. She sleeps in her office. She's always working and she's in dangerous situations because she needs to get stories about dangerous people, trades sex for stories and does all kinds of stuff, right? So she is kind of unscrupulous in that way. A little bit of a damaged heroine, but still like ballsy and like strong in a lot of ways where she's not like annoying, like damaged, but not annoying, like damaged, but like kind of relatable. Like, wow, I can see somebody in real life being like this if they had this upbringing, right? So she ends up getting wind of a story that she's basically kind of compelled to go cover in Venice. Now, let's pause. This is a connecting line back into the Faustis. So in one of the books, I think it's either book 5 or 6 in the Fausti family, there is a party in Venice where it's some sort of celebration. It's like a charitable ball in name. Luca's the head of the family, but one of his brothers, he has a brother named Lothario. Yeah, it's a brother. That's a real name, apparently. I always giggle. So Luca has a brother named Lothario, and Lothario tries to take power from Luca. And there's just like bloodshed that happens. So let's resume talking about dangerous obsession, because that's the story that Ava gets compelled to go cover. It's not by Vice City. It's another means, and I won't bore you with the details of it. Just read the book, and it'll make sense. Read it after you read the Faustis, okay? Anyway, I digress. This is getting really long, but that's fine. So she writes under the name Pepper Nash. So she goes to this party in Venice as Pepper Nash. Spends her life savings on the airfare, the dress, the accommodations. And while she's there, she's like, overwhelmed by like seeing all these Faustis. She knows their faces because she has she has bio and photo information, kind of like playing card style back in her office. And by the way, her publisher of the Vice City shares her obsession. It's kind of where she got it. So anyway, she goes to this story. The S goes down, and in all of the melee, it has an encounter with Nazareno Fausti. And it's like thunderbolts and lightning. They have this connection. And then they like part ways in kind of all of the fray. But she's there and kind of nobody knows really that she's got press credentials. For some reason, the next day they Luca has her hauled in. And is like, do you know this person? Like how you're trying to get dirt. We know you're a Pepper Nash. In kind of what you're going to, and then the reason that she was sent there is revealed, and it's a threat to Brando and Scarlett. So she's got to, kind of has to explain herself. She does, and they're like, okay, you need to be watched. So they have Naz watch her. So then the rest of the story unfolds from there, and like kind of their love story, kind of how it deepens, and a bunch of the kind of resolution of kind of her demons happens as well. And the thing that's so interesting, again, is like I said, this is like picks up in a point in the Fausti kind of series that's not the end, but like kind of like middle towards like not quite the end, right? But it's just like in the middle of the series. It's like, oh, this thing happened. Let's deepen these characters' relationship that we kind of got a glimpse in that like Fausti book, but now they're going to get their own story, and it's a total like it's so romantic and beautiful, and I loved it. And like they're in Copenhagen, and they're in Italy, and they're in New York, and like, and it was just great. And I'm so excited because so Naz is part of a different Fausti line. So she's like opened up a different Fausti line. It's not just the Luca boys. We'll talk about them in a second. But it's like the Lothario boys. And Lothario has other sons too. So it's like a new Fausti line. And again, it has a different tone. So it's like related, but its own. So for Dangerous Obsession, I would definitely read Fausti first. It'll make more sense. If you don't, it's not that big of a deal, but you'll want to read Fausti. So by the way, the Fausti Family saga, like the all 8 books, is like 4,300 pages. So it's fine. It's not a big deal, but it's like, it's an investment. So, and I don't make it, it's great. It's a great time, but it's, if you're like somebody who likes to read things in order, I'm trying to give you the order. Okay. So here we go. God, I think you can see what this is. Anyway. Okay. Maybe this will make the edit. I don't know. Okay. Let's move on. So then we have Disavow. Now this follows Agnello and Rosalia. Now this book was part of the Underworld Kings series of like full-length novels that Amazon had authors put out. So there was 13 books in the series. This is one of the entries, Disavow, where there was some sort of like place in New York or something that was like a tie that binds or like a family name or something. So there was something that connected each of these books, but it wasn't like really, really, really well coordinated beyond that. So this is like I said, full-length story. And I would really call this a romantic suspense as well as a mafia book. So we meet Rosalia because she works in a club called The Ruin. And this story is loosely based on the real-life syndicate called Murder, Inc. Now, she works at this club called The Ruin. She's not to be fraternizing with any of the members there, but she keeps finding herself in Agnello's orbit. Okay, so they do end up embarking on a tryst in secret. One thing to know is that she's lost her memory. So she doesn't really remember much beyond a year or so prior to when we meet her. And Agnello has a part of her past, but she doesn't remember. So the really romantic suspense part is kind of unfolding his part in her past and what happened to have her lose her memory. So it's action packed. It's beautiful. They have a deep love. It's spicy. I would describe the tone as stark. I mean, as opposed to the lushness of some of the other stories in the Bella DiCorte catalog. This was kind of the most like stark and desolate. And I think it's just a reflection of Rosalia's lost memory. So highly recommend this one. I love this one. It's a really, really great standalone. So if all of these books, if you're like, you know what, I just want to read one book to see if I like this author, you can check out any of the books from the Gangsters of New York series, except I wouldn't do Mercenary. I would either do Machiavellian or Marauder or Disavow. And I think you'll get a good sense of the author's skills. Okay. So then we have Till Death Do Us Part, which is the Roma and Felice's story. And this is a standalone. Now, this is set in Chicago. So typically we're in New York or Italy or some other European place. Here we're in Chicago. Okay. So this story follows, like I said, Felice and Roma. Now, Roma is studying, I think she's a paleontologist or something. And she's part of a family, like a Chicago mafia family. And they're waiting for her sister to get married. There's like this whole, like, you've got to get married kind of setting, which I've read like a lot of the books about the Chicago, like the outfit or kind of whatever you'd want to call the mafia there. It's a lot of the girls being married off. So this is kind of no different. So I wonder if that's like what it's really like. I don't know. Or maybe the authors are just like, oh, this is a thing to do. But anyway, so Felice meets Roma. Now she's like mid-20s. He's nearly 40. So it's a pretty good age gap. Um, so it's basically about his courtship of her. I'm not really going to go into that because he's got a little bit of competition. Her being a paleontologist and wanting to work is a really big part of that. And kind of how he maneuvers through all of the kind of roadblocks and then being together. Um, just beautiful. I really did enjoy this story a lot. This isn't my like ultimate favorite, but definitely a good entry. Okay. Then we have The Beast of Boston. This follows Kian and Maeve. Now, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Now, listen, I'm not going to get really too deep into this one because I did rate it for, I think it was, it doesn't matter. It was earlier in 2023, or actually later in 2023, but I've already reviewed this. This was one of my top 10 books of 2023, 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. A fantastic Beauty and the Beast retelling, faithful to the Disney series in a way, but with a really interesting twist. Kian is trying to take over the organized crime like control of Boston, and he is battling the Craigs. Now they're the villains in the story. Now we meet the Craigs. Do we meet them in Marauder? We for sure. They're also the villains in Bone Deep. So, again, a tie that binds. Okay, so you're just kind of like, oh yeah, I know these people. Like you're familiar, but it really is. It's like they get fleshed out in a different way in The Beast of Boston. That's like super interesting. So I really loved the story Beast of Boston. This again is a good standalone if you like Beauty and the Beast retellings, if you like Irish organized crime stories. This one is a great one to read. And for me, I don't like Beauty and the Beast stories. I said this in my wrap up. I just find Stockholm syndrome to not be that sexy. So, take that as you want. But I loved the kind of the twist or the kind of way that she made Key and the Beast to be much more palatable, much more interesting to me. So I super loved it. So go read it. It's great. And then we have Mr. Big. Now, this story follows Tullio and Lenora. This is book 1 of the Mobsters of Vegas series. So again, we're in a new city, new vibe, new tone. And I've been to Vegas, unfortunately. Whatever. What are you going to do? So anyway, I don't like Vegas. That's why I'm having that reaction. But it's just like, it's a vibe, right? But this story, when it was released, I think in November of 2023, is the expanded Mr. Big story that was actually an entry in the Vows and Vendettas anthology that was released earlier in 2023, I believe. So this storyline started out as a novella and has been expanded. Now, this story is in Vegas. This story is in Italy. Again, we just can't just stay in one place with Miss DiCorte, okay? So it really fleshes out the Vegas world because they get married pretty early, but she's got their side characters, their kind of deeper kind of storyline that's really setting up the Vegas like kind of crime situation kind of storylines pretty well, I think. And it also features Mr. Rocco Fausti. So we've seen Rocco Fausti in Machiavellian. He's all over, obviously, the Fausti series. He was in Marauder. He was in Beast of Boston. Was he? Cash Kelly was definitely in Beast of Boston. Was he in Bone Deep? He's definitely in Mr. Big. I mean, I could go on. He's like the hardest working cameo character in the Bella DiCorte world. But this book really kind of deepens his storyline. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But who features them? It's super interesting. She's got Leonora is the heroine in this book, and she's got a friend who's got a really interesting story as well. So let's talk about Leonora and Tullio. Okay, so that's who this story is about. So Tullio is like a big deal guy in Vegas. He owns a hotel and casino called Paradiso. And he meets Leonora one day when she is caught stealing from his casino. So she basically does it to get a meeting with him, because her story is that she is working in Vegas. She manages a club that's, I think, a strip club, but she doesn't strip. She just dances, but I don't know that she really strips, but she's just like scantily clad, but she's the manager. And she has a couple of half brothers that she's basically their guardian. One of her, like her older, he's like 16. She's 28. The brother has his arm broken by kind of a shady guy for whom the brother was running drugs. Like he did like one job and then something went awry and like gets his arm broken. And the sister's super distraught. She's like she's like kind of a ballsy chick where she's like, oh my God, I had to pay all this money to the hospital when your thug beat up and like broke my 16-year-old brother's arm. You owe me money. So she like steals it as a way to get a meeting with him so she can have this conversation with Tulio. Because he's like, okay, you steal from me, you either pay me back or I take your hand. But he sees her, is completely entranced by her. She's super beautiful. She's of Greek heritage. And yes, she's blonde. I think her father was Greek and her mother is, fair, just kind of like mud American. And so she's blonde and blue-eyed. And he's like, she's my Aphrodite. And he's like, all right, you marry me or I take your hand. And she's like, well, I'm going to marry you, I guess. So there's a little bit more back and forth than that, but they end up getting in an arranged marriage, but having really strong feelings for each other, pretty quick. So, and then the story unfolds from there. The Vegas world is really fleshed out, like I said, and it's really cool. So I'm really excited for the Monsters of Vegas series. We'll see when that comes out. Okay. All right. This is almost an hour already. Okay, good. Long book. And that's okay. I knew it was going to be just because there's a lot of books and there's a lot to say. So, okay. Let's talk about what's coming up for Miss DiCorte. So there's some books that are coming up that I'm really excited for. She's announced some titles. And one of these has a general release time frame, and that is King of Italy. Now, this is the book I'm so excited for this book because this is Rocco Fausti's story. Finally, it's happening for him. Woo! Like super excited, right? Now, why am I super excited for Rocco? Because Rocco, when we meet him, he's in an arranged marriage and he stays in this arranged marriage. But it's open. Both he and his wife have, extramarital relations, affairs. I don't think they're super long because I don't think either of them would really tolerate anything like with like deep feeling. So they have trysts, right? Although I have a suspicion he has more than she does because, they're Italian men, right? But anyway, his wife is a famous opera singer. And she really is cast as the villain in a lot. She shows up in multiple books in the Fausti series. She shows up in Dangerous Obsession. And she also, I believe she shows up in Mr. Big as well. A little bit. Yeah. Anyway, she's a straight villain. And I'm just like, okay, if they're going to end up together, like that's a redemption arc right there. Because by the time that the Fausti Family series wraps, Rocco is still with Rosario is his wife's name. They're still together. He's super unhappy. He's a very romantic soul, and he wants the kind of love that he sees Brando and Scarlett have. And he's probably pushing 50 by the end of the Fausti series, and still in this marriage, right? So I'm like, okay, well, what is Rocco's story going to be? Like, who does he end up with, right? So I'm just like, how are you going to do this? Either way, I think it's going to be super interesting. So I'm super excited. She's given herself all of 2024 to write it. She's listed the release date as December 16th or something like that of 2024. And she's like, I want to get it out earlier. And we're like, girl, you just take all the time that you need because you were working overtime in 2023. She released 3 books in 2023, which I think is a lot. And so if you need your time to make this story really well crafted and complete and satisfying, you take it. I will just look forward to the holiday, right? To read. It's called The King of Italy. Okay. So that's Rocco's story. Now, then we have the Queen of Wildflowers. This is a title that she announced it will be forthcoming as well. So this is Maggie and Luca's story. Now, let's go back to Brando Fausti. These are his parents. So remember I said this is a super interesting relationship because Maggie was 16 when she had Brando. Luca was not 16. Luca was a grown-ass man. I don't know how far into his 20s he was. I'd like to think he was under 25. I hope. I really hope so. This is going to be super interesting to see how she's going to kind of delicately discuss the age difference and her being underage. Because I don't know, that seems to be a fairly taboo, like age. Be like 17, and some people are like, ah! But she's like freaking 16 and she gives birth to a child. So, anyways, it's going to be really interesting. And then, we see a lot of Maggie throughout the whole Fausti series. By the end of the series, Maggie and Luca are together. So, I mean, I'm super excited to get to know more about Luca and what kind of drives him, what has him love Maggie, her a little bit more. Because like I said, the way that she's characterized in the Fausti series, like the 8-book one, she can't read when we meet her. And then she comes such a long way. And she's this she's called the Queen of Wildflowers. Luca calls her his butterfly. So it's like, she's this kind of free-spirited person and he's this ruthless mafia don. So it's like, how is this going to work out? So I'm really excited for that. No release date, but hopefully we get it within a couple of years. So, and then finally we have The Prince of Verona. Now again, this is a title that the author Bella DiCorte has announced she is working on and will release. Now this is Romeo and Juliet's story. That's right. I said it. Romeo and Juliet's story. Now, who is Romeo? Romeo is one of Brando's brothers. He's a brother to he's a brother to Rocco and Brando. Okay. Now, in the Fausti series, he meets his wife named Juliet. Now, Juliet is she's the cousin of Scarlett's best friend from their hometown in Louisiana. And they don't go too much into their relationship. We know they get together, but there's a whole lot that apparently they had to go through. Like it's quoted in one of the books is like, they went through a lot to be together. And so I think this story is going to flesh that out. But they're always whenever they're mentioned, they always have this kind of interesting way of interacting with one another. Like they're sharing secrets and whatever he says makes her laugh. I'm like, this would be a really interesting relationship to bring to life, right? Because I'm like, they're so interesting, when we read about them. So those are the 3 books that are for sure are being worked on. Now, like I said, I would like another Ryan Brothers book. Okay. I would also like another Mobsters of Vegas book. Okay. I would also like another, Chicago Outfit book. Okay. But listen, this is just one woman. So let's not get, too big for our britches and too demanding of just one woman. So that's it for my author wrap up. I know I've teased this for a long time, but it mostly just took me a long time to kind of organize my thoughts and get everything kind of situated so I could give you kind of a picture of the breadth of the stories and the really unique way they interconnect. So I hope you give this author a shot. I think she writes beautifully. She does a really great job of setting a tone and really creating this world you can immerse yourself in. And it's just a thoroughly enjoyable experience to read her work. So that's it for me today. I really hope you have enjoyed this video. Check out this author. She's almost all of her books are in Kindle Unlimited if they're still available. So there's that. Thank you for being here. Thanks for watching. And as always, have a wonderful day.